artistic and ambitious, or pretentious and confusing? Which is it? Or maybe that can all be true. We are talking the Jonathan Zorin directed Wyvern Hill, also known as Hollow. This is a 2021 drama, psychological thriller, slasher movie. Okay, so the premise of this one is that our central character is this older woman in her probably her late 60s who is suffering from onset dementia. And she's confused, seeing things, not remembering things, stuff like that. And her daughter and her son-in-law combine resources, along with this woman Beth, to buy a house in the country. At the same time, there is a serial killer that is going around and using very horrific methods to kill his victims. He likes turning them into kind of marionettes. But this killer may be closer than these protagonists think, as it may even well be in their very house. Now, as the film goes on, you have to question what is reality, what is kind of Beth getting confused about and is just seeing and stuff like that. What will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So, I should point out, as I say, this was originally made as Wyvern Hill, but it was kind of later changed to Hollow. If you see this picture of the movie poster Hollow, it is nothing like this kind of poster tries to sell you that it is. There's no supernatural entities here. It is a drama and a slasher movie, if you're looking at its horror components. Nothing to do with demons coming up dragging you to hell or whatever. So what works in this movie's favour? So this is clearly a movie that is trying to appeal to what it sees as the higher echelons of the intellectual horror fandom. You know, the wannabe A24 style kind of elevated horror that we sometimes kind of see here. Does it succeed? Well, that's going to be out for debate. What I think it does do is demonstrate the confusion that someone who is suffering from dementia can experience. I think the movie does do a good job of effectively expressing this type of condition in the form of this movie by kind of showing us as the audience some of the kind of the fractured realities that our character of Beth is experiencing, and how you are piecing together what is real, what is not. So I do think the movie succeeds in doing that, in kind of, you know, letting the audience experience this kind of, at least a snapshot into a world of, you know, confusion and dementia, or maybe Alzheimer's, or something along the lines of that. So there's that. When we have our horror elements, and I have to say that horror elements are kind of late in the game, that we get a little bit snippets here and there in the movie, but really the horror doesn't really come into full force until really towards the end of the movie. It is brutal, it is torturous, it is you know, quite hardcore in some ways, and it has a degree of psychological torture that is put upon our victims. So it's very jarring, because the rest of the movie more plays like a drama in regards to this kind of family that is struggling with the pressure and the responsibility of having an elderly relative live with you who gets confused and is obviously in kind of failing mental health, basically. So it kind of comes out when we get these kind of horror elements, and there's one scene in particular at the end which I think is pretty grotesque. It hits because the film has been so subtle with it to a degree up until this point, or maybe he just hasn't shown. At one point, you'd even forget you're watching a horror film. You think you're watching some drama about old people. The acting is mostly good, and I think the performances are solid. There's a few scenes where I don't think it quite connected, but for the most part, I think the acting is sort of solid and you know, believable in their kind of roles. Certainly ones that are kind of more down-to-earth characters, shall we say. I think the dramatic stuff mostly works. Not all the time, but mostly. VFX-wise, I think that it's fairly strong. As I say, don't be expecting a lot of kind of horror VFX, at least until we get to the second half of the third act, really. But yeah, it's effective when we kind of do see it. I think there are some musical cues that are a little overpowering, but I think the music, again, is somewhat suitable for what we see on the screen. And as I say, I think if you are a fan of the more artistic style of movies, or horror movies, then I can see this movie is trying to appeal to that demographic. However, I will say I think the movie's biggest downfall here is it's just confusing. You know, obviously you can understand what the filmmakers here are trying to do to show us, the audience, that, you know, this is the world that this character of Beth is living in. We're not sure what's real, what isn't. But at the same time, you're making your audience kind of a little bit disconnected at the same time. It doesn't really bring you along for the ride. And I really didn't feel there was much kind of clarification about what is real and what isn't. Because I feel the movie, it just clearly wants to be ambiguous. And I feel that would be frustrating. And I think the narrative here isn't quite as strong as it thinks it is. And I do think it comes across as somewhat pretentious. There's also long periods here where it feels a lot more like a drama than it does a horror movie. And, you know, I said when the horror hits, it hits a little harder. Because it does feel like a drama at the same, you know, for so long in this runtime. And it's a relatively long runtime. But I do think the horror elements, this killer, it feels way underdeveloped, way underdeveloped, and is just there to be shocking, it feels like. So I think the story here is unsatisfying. You know, I understand the premise, and I understand obviously that the style of the film is trying to deliberately be confusing, but I think it maybe isn't clear enough, and I think it doesn't straddle that line for telling the audience, oh, this is the kind of like the experience that someone's going to be feeling when they have dementia, but also telling a narrative that the audience can kind of grip onto. I don't think it does that. As I mentioned, I think the acting is mostly good, but there are some scenes where I just feel that wasn't a good take. You know, this could have been done in a better take. And then we have our horror element, and it's a little bit too over the top, I have to say. I just think it's like it's very almost silly, to be honest with you. And you're thinking, okay, so if this is real, surely the amount of time that things would take would just seem like ridiculous. The fact that a killer seems to be getting on his marigold rubber gloves, getting the bleach out, clearing stuff, you know, this is what he must be doing when there's no one around, is all I'm kind of saying. You know, one of these things of slasher films, there's no evidence, so he must be getting the bleach out, wipe that surface down, get the mop out, you know. It's, you know, it's just not a particularly satisfying film overall. I think some elements here just needed to be reined in. Our director has all these kind of like loads of, you know, establishing shots, lots of kind of shots here to make you feel, oh look, you know, it's confusion. It's sort of like we're inside Beth's head and stuff, and it's just like, oh, okay, I get it. Like, I get it. You know, we don't keep needing to kind of like spend so long dealing with these kind of like, oh, you know, woo kind of shots there. And I have to say, I just think it's not as clever as it thinks it is. I think it does come across as a little bit too like, haha, I'm up my own arse to a certain degree. I'm going to give this one a 4 out of 10. There are flourishes here that I think work. If you take a scene and you think, what is this scene telling you? I think, yeah, you could get stuff from it. But when you string it together as a story, then it fails. I'm going to give it a 4 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.